想要让汉堡觉得更超值，我们会叫它巨无霸；想要让地标更容易记，我们会叫它大本钟；想要让结论更可信，我们会用大数据。就连宇宙都是从一次大爆炸开始的。人类对 big 的崇拜几乎是一种本能，而汽车行业把这种本能利用到了极致。想让一台车看起来更超值，最省事的办法就是把它做大。
Blah, 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 size, bigger. And bigger is better.
于是我做了一张非常直白的表，看看每个品牌最大的那台车到底有多大。往下滑，你会看到大家都在比谁更像移动的大平层。但当你滑到表格最底部，有那么个品牌，它的最大车型车长居然还不到4.5米，它就是迷你。所以这一期我和迷你的设计负责人 Holger Hampf 聊了聊几个也许他也觉得头疼的问题。在一个全世界都在变大的时代，把车坚持做小，到底靠什么成立？在这个越来越极简设计的时代，迷你独特的风格化该怎么保持？当屏幕越来越多，按钮越来越少，自动驾驶把车变成车轮上的家的时代，迷你还剩下什么是不可替代的？Holger 作为前宝马数字体验和宝马 Design Works 的负责人，如今在电动化转型的今天接手迷你，这到底是新的挑战，还是一个烫手山芋？ You once said that Mini's DNA is racing and contemporary design. Racing is quite easier for me to understand because Mini has a racing heritage. But regarding the contemporary design, it was influenced by the society, by the culture, and by the latest technology. In Mini's case, what does contemporary design actually mean?
I definitely don't regard design as only a statement about aesthetics. It's also construction, engineering. It's kind of how things are being put together. And Mini was always, from the first moment, regarded as a very innovative company. So in terms of its engineering and kind of how you put an engine into a car and the size of the car itself, yes, it was influenced by society and the state of society at the time when Mini started. But at the same time, it was kind of an engineering challenge and an achievement. So contemporary is very often related to innovation to me, staying ahead, challenging the norm, doing things differently. And Mini was very good at that always, and I think it still is, doing things different from the rest of the bunch.
If we look at the Mini's vehicle's silhouette and the proportion, they basically have never changed since day one. From my understanding and from my observation, Mini's design is a timeless design. So do you think timeless design versus the contemporary design, those two ideas seems like a little bit contradiction?
Yeah, I think at first they seem contradictory, but to me that's the challenge generally in design and also in automotive design, to find the balance between retaining certain things and retaining proportions and staying true to the original, and at the same time moving forward and developing something towards the future. I think Mini, again, has been very good at it. You will always see that original car and the proportions, and we are very committed to it. On the other hand, you cannot stand still, just do what you've always done. You need to move on, especially when it comes to technology, cleanliness, and more contemporary design trends as well. I think it's always a proper balance between the two. I think in good products and good cars, you find both, if possible. Not many can do it, but that's the art of finding the sweet spot.
I read some reports and it said that Mini's new design language is called Charismatic simplicity. It sounds like another contradiction to me, because charismatics represents you need to add deco, but simplicity suggests you need to take deco away. What's the charismatic simplicity really stand for Mini?
Yes, a contradiction, or maybe sometimes described in cultures as a yin and yang of things, kind of how they hang together and how they in the first moment contradict, but then also become one interesting story, hang together. They cannot be separated. So yeah, I think With Mini, definitely the word charisma comes from its past, its Britishness, its quirkiness, just being different, being rebellious product in a certain way. Really saying like, okay, everyone is going right, I'm going left. And Mini retains that very well. Simplicity, on the other hand, is maybe connected a bit more to our past, to the original Mini. That was very simplistic. I, as a designer, and now for Mini, feel that it is very necessary to try to create something that gives us a certain reassurance, not to be too busy in today's world full of noise, form and shape, and everyone competing on being more important than the other. To me, it's a bit of a contradiction, but it's something that belongs together in a certain way. And if it's done well, it actually becomes one statement. It's a balancing act.
Yeah. I watched some of your interviews, and you said that you learned less is more in Germany, and you learned let's do it in California. For me, it's like a charismatic simplicity, you know.
To me, design is really about finding what feels right. You know, I think there are so many designs that, or many things around us that go over the top, and they are maybe after a short while they are even annoying, and I want to give them away. I don't care about them. I lose connection to them because maybe they are a little bit too much. And then there are things that we never build a relationship. They're not emotional. They're not touching us. Finding a proper balance in design is what always interests me. You know, you can have a table full of food, but it doesn't touch you because of the amount of food. It needs to be well prepared. It needs to be the right amount. So Mini, to me, and this is something I'm also discussing every day with the design team, is 2 words to me: just right, which is the most difficult thing to achieve in design.
Yeah.
Just right. You know, there's so many cars where you think like, yeah, I could leave this out and then it would be right. Yeah. Why didn't you leave it out? And then there are things that are not enough of it. And you think like, why didn't you add a little bit? So finding the balance, that's what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of just right design, I noticed that nowadays there is an interior design trend in this industry, is that less physical buttons and more interaction with the central screen. We put a lot of user interface into the screen and located in the middle of the instrument panel. How do you view this kind of screen-dominated trend?
That's the perfect example for what I mean with just right. I think we might have gone a little bit too far in terms of fully relying on touch interfaces and glass. We took every button away, every physical point of interaction. Maybe the steering wheel is the last point of physical interaction, which is so important. But again, I feel technology advancements, yes, touch interfaces, large screens, user interface has become very important. You cannot do without. But the amount of screens, the amount of glass in the car, the amount of touch might have taken us down a path that is not very HMI, not very human-to-machine interaction. So again, a perfect example of getting it right. We've seen cars with too many buttons and too many physical interfaces. You lose orientation. It's one of these challenges that I hope at BMW and Mini we get right. But I would say at this point of time, in some instances, I feel we have taken it a notch too far.
And I noticed in Neue Klasse platform, the BMW has already removed the iDrive Island.
Yes.
Will Mini follow this kind of trend? Because nowadays in the current generation, you still keep some physical buttons under the screen. For the next generation, will you remove all the physical buttons?
I think we've all hoped that we are a lot further with voice at this point of time. I think that was the reason in the first place why to get rid of physical interfaces, because we anticipated maybe 10 years ago that by now everyone will just speak to their car and command the car to do certain things by voice. That has proven way more challenging, I think, at least in some cultures. Maybe less so in China. It's very advanced here to control your car by voice. In European cultures with a lot of differences in languages, it has been more difficult. But I think it's a very important consideration because it led us to believe that we just produce cars without buttons. We interact with the car by voice, and when voice doesn't work, we touch on glass. So this is actually a triangle to me. I think in the future, at some point of time, there will probably an increase in voice and a more comfortable interaction with voice commands. You need to be right at a certain point in time and
find it a sweet spot.
Yeah, exactly. I also think that sometimes it is not always perfect at the first time. We've seen smartphones, and I don't name a company, but you have to stick to it, you have to develop it. It's an evolution, you know. There's no digital product, no interface that's perfect in its first generation. That's why we see updates over the air. That's why we see new software versions. They become better each and every time. Hopefully, if the company is doing a good job, they become better each and every time. That's what we have to adapt in the car, to improve things over time. Mini is the first company that has a round user interface.
Yeah.
And you might have some questions about this, but it is obviously, from a visual point of view, it is very appealing and people love it. But the interface itself is harder to learn because it takes us away from mental models that we've learned in school. Rectilinear, up, down, left, right, logic. We now have to stick to it and we have to develop it. These things you can never get 100% right in the first generation.
I have to say, if Mini is with a rectangle screen, I might not have bought it.
Exactly.
Yes, I know this kind of iconic design because nowadays almost all the car interior looks just too similar. And when I see the Mini's interior, I know it's Mini because of the round OLED screen. Yeah. Speaking of less and less physical buttons, if this trend cannot be reversed, do you ever worry it might take away some Mini's charm because you will not have haptic feeling anymore?
You know, Mini and also BMW, brands that base their product design decisions on customer feedback. It's a customer-centric design process. And yeah, very often we make decisions that are based on our expertise, but we also listen to customers. I think Mini customers or fans of Mini that drove many Minis before, had Mini before, they give us some feedback on the feeling inside a Mini. We've heard things like Mini always feels a bit like a small cockpit. It surrounds you, centered around the driver and the passenger. So it might even feel a bit more like reaching to certain functions, for example, the control center in the roof and so on. People actually sometimes tell us that's something we like to have physical.
Yeah.
To me, good design is also about listening to customers and understanding preferences. Then it is about an evolution to kind of develop, perfectionize your product.
我最近在整理以前大学时期看的汽车杂志，其中登在《名车志》2010年1月刊上的一则迷你的广告吸引了我的注意。广告中展示了 Paul Smith 为迷你的老爷车做的定制化设计，而在里面还提到了在 Paul Smith 首开先河后，范思哲、米索尼、施华洛世奇、迪赛等等知名品牌纷纷为迷你贡献了创意。而在15年后的今天，迷你又再一次和 Paul Smith 合作，推出了联名的设计款。为什么迷你和 Paul Smith 如此来电？而且迷你为什么要在当下如此追求效率的汽车行业去做联名这样看起来吃力不讨好的事情呢？那让我们接下去一起听听 Holger 是怎么说的。
And let's talk about the Mini customization. Mini collaborated with Dios and premiered 2 one-offs in IAA. And nowadays you brought the collaboration with Paul Smith. What's the purpose behind this frequent collaboration?
Well, first of all, it's explorative and a bit of an experiment, if I tell you the truth. It's about a design dialogue with another brand, as Mini admire. Deus and also Paul Smith are inspirational brands to us. And I hope the other way around, the same way. To Paul, Mini is a very interesting brand. To Deus, Mini is an interesting brand. We try out new things. We take the brand to new areas where it wouldn't go alone. Funny enough, in the context of customization, we find that it is very welcome by our friends and customers and fans because they appreciate that Mini is a very individual product that is, in some cases, never really the same. You start with a canvas and then you kind of add your own personality to it, your own style to it. And Deus and Paul Smith opened the possibility of adding a style to it even more so in terms of giving additional color and material options and choices, in terms of giving livery graphics, sometimes very expressive graphics, new colorways. I do hope that at the end these collaborations not only inspire us internally as a design team, but also our customers to do something else with their cars. It's a bit of a playground, which Mini always has been a playful brand. But I don't mean playful as a funny brand. I mean it as an inspiration to be creative and to express yourself, play with your personality. I mean, we do this in fashion all day long, and I think a car is sometimes very much the same. Like fashion, it is an expression of us, it's an extension of us. And Mini is just a perfect brand, not only be perceived fashionable, but also conscious in an environmental context. You drive a small car, you are not ostentatious, loud, you are actually friendly and positive, you are inviting in a certain way. So all of these things, they play into good design and into kind of also who we would collaborate with. But first and foremost, it's an experiment. It's a way of playing with the brand, of extending the brand, allowing our customers to see Mini from many different angles.
And when I look at these collaborated cars, I have a feeling that Mini is like a performer or an actor. As long as you give them different styling or different stage, it will give you totally different character. Speaking of personality, I might have to challenge you a little bit, because in today's industry, we can notice that almost all the brands, they are trying to reduce their trim levels, even reduce their car models in order to increase the efficiency. But Mini is playing with the collaboration. For me, Mini is trying to go to an opposite direction to enhance the personality. So how do you push something like that internally? I can imagine that you will get a lot of pressure from R&D, from manufacturing side, and even logistics side.
Variance and kind of the complexity that comes with choice is definitely something that is often challenged in our industry internally, from R&D, from marketing, from distribution. But Mini, I would claim, is a brand that especially cannot do without giving choice to customers, to personalize it, to individualize it. We actually see an increase of that. And, you know, if I'm correct, you will see more of that from other car brands as well. I believe we went too far in digitizing a selection process of saying like, okay, there's 3 choices, black, white, and silver. That's all you have. Maybe sometimes we found in the market that people end up with this choice, but Mini is not a brand that should do that, I feel. It's a careful balance again, so sorry to say, but there's a certain curation of choices. Otherwise, we would end up with potentially some choices that are not looking so good. But to open this up and allow people to make a choice about their car, their preference, is very important, and Mini shouldn't do without.
So are there any Chinese brands or designers you would like to collaborate with in the future?
I have a very long list of people I would like to collaborate with. To tell you the truth, it's not very limited. We will definitely continue this, first of all, and I want to do regular collaborations with Mini. I would love to actually collaborate even more so with companies that bring their design style and philosophy to Mini. Deus was, I think, one of the first good examples where I really think we found a proper balance of retaining Mini. So you see that it's a Mini from all sides. You walk around these 2 cars and you know this is Mini, but at the same time you see kind of the Deusness in them, you know, in terms of the material choice, when you open a door, when you just look at the roof. And it might be the strong graphics, but it's also how we develop certain elements, the attention to detail, the attention to craftsmanship, this kind of notion of customizing motorcycles and old vintage cars. You feel that in the product without losing Mininess. And that's, again, it's a careful consideration. So a collaboration, to me, in today's world, unfortunately, is often driven by business and driven by reaching more customers or selling more. To me, a collaboration needs to be authentic, honest, real, raw. It needs to give freedom to a design team to work together, to speak to one another. And only if that is the case, the collaboration can be successful and also understood by an audience. We've seen many bad examples of collaborations, let's be honest. For Mini, I would only engage with a partner if I have the feeling that this can lead to something honest and real.
Anyway, my wife will be super happy if you can collaborate with Labubu.
Okay, good. Okay, I'll take that home with me.
Speaking of the Mini vintage cars, just you mentioned, Mini has so many classic models, and they are still loved by the enthusiasts all over the world. And we can see that nowadays a lot of companies are doing retro mode for the classic cars, like Singer rest mode the Porsche 964. Zero Lab, they rest mode the Bronco and Range Rover. Will Mini have this kind of plan to rebuild and modernize the classic Mini in the future?
There are currently no plans. I think, we call it the Classic Mini, is perfect in its own right. We've done a collaboration with Paul Smith to revive a Classic Mini as well and electrify it. There's definitely a nice fan base of Classic Minis. I just went to Japan, to Tokyo, and there's really a celebration of the Classic Mini. I find it right. But then, to me, this leads to this discussion about size and the increase of size. You've done a couple of wonderful podcasts on explaining size and why cars are also growing. And I think there is something that when you put one of the Classic Minis into today's world out there, I have a little bit of a concern because we appreciate the size of a Classic Mini when it sits there in a parking lot or in a studio. When you put it out into today's world with a lot of SUVs and very large cars and lots of size around it, it doesn't look right anymore. So in addition to some of your findings that I really appreciate and that I think that are true, I always also think that the world around some of our cars has grown. Furniture has grown. Spaces have grown. People want bigger apartments.
Our phone is growing.
Our phone is growing, yes. Sometimes to a size that looks more like a tablet than a phone. And I find it sometimes, put you back into the first generation of a smartphone. You will tell me, why is this so small? What should I do with it or so? So again, we have to be careful about wishing for the size of an object the way it was 30, 40 years ago. Put it in today's world, there might be a mismatch.
And since we were talking about size, Mini is known for being small and agile. With the autonomous driving become more and more mature, people might care less about the driving experience. They might only care about the interior space, the interior comfort, the interior roominess. So do you have concern that on that day, does this world still need Mini?
I think the world needs more Mini than ever before, to tell you the truth. And I'm not saying this because I work for Mini. This is really my belief that we went too far in driving around a lot of space, interior space, exterior volume. I drive Mini myself, you drive Mini. Sometimes you drive a Mini and you feel this is all I need, actually. If it is technologically advanced and kind of can compete with other products around it, for example, assisted drive functionality, and there's no doubt that we have to keep up on some of these features and the functionality. Also, Mini needs to deliver on that, and we do that. But at the same time, I wonder if we always need bigger sizes of cars for comfort reasons and so on. I think a Mini, as a matter of fact, and I'm a tall person, is quite comfortable. I don't feel at any given point of time that I need more space. Okay, when I go on vacation maybe with 2 kids or something, but my son is 23, he studies in a different country. I'm with my wife. Mini is all I need, really. I don't need a bigger car, especially not in the city. I don't make a very positive statement when I drive around in the city in a very large vehicle.
However, I was told that when autonomous driving comes to the reality, the vehicle will become the house on wheel. And I think most of the people like bigger house. At that time,
Do you have concern that Mini will lose its advantages?
I do hope that Mini is maybe one of those car brands that can retain a certain also balance between self-driving and being driven. I think the aspect of autonomous driving is coming from very slow speeds in urban environment. We sometimes, we drive around with 15 kilometers per hour, 20 kilometers per hour, and I can easily hand over to the car. But when it comes to the other part of driving, maybe that is also not necessarily all about high speed on a racetrack, but it is a little bit of fun just outside the city, where a Mini is, again, a perfect. This is still true to Mini today, that it has a little bit of that go-kart feel and this cornering feel. It's very close to the street, to the tarmac, and it brings you these moments of fun and thrill in a small package in a certain way. So you don't need to drive a super sports car or something to have fun. Actually, Mini can deliver on that. So I think, it will most likely fall short on a vast interior space that reminds us of our luxurious apartments. But I think that was never the purpose for Mini. It was always this notion of being comfortable, having enough space, not much more than you actually need, and at the same time giving you driving pleasure. And I think Mini today still does that. If electric or combustion engine, it gives you that little bit of thrill. And in terms of technology as well, it will do the same in terms of autonomous driving and others functionality.
And I watched your speech in service design several years ago.
Okay, that is a long time ago. Yeah, okay.
And you mentioned that Relevant will be super important for the automotive design, the interaction. And from my observation, for the Mini petrolhead fanboys, the Relevant comes from the community, comes from the engine tuning, the suspension tuning culture, and it comes from the go-kart driving experience feeling. Nowadays, we are in an electric era. How do you plan to keep Mini relevant to its customers?
Yeah, relevance is a very important word to me, because if you lose relevance, you lose the connection to customers and to your fan base. It is a challenge. I think I drive into an area like where this studio is here, and I immediately feel the love for mechanics, the love for what Deus also presented to us. That is something that most likely will get lost on the electric side a little bit, because we grew up messing around with engines and so on, but they also brought a certain complexity with it. And today I think there should be space for both, maybe, in our world. I've once had a conversation with a Mini fan, I think it was this year in April in Shanghai, who made a difference between a tool and a car. He called the electric car his tool. That does a very good job at many things during the day, driving kids to school, commuting, going to the supermarket, and so on. And then there was, on the other hand, the car gave driving pleasure and so on. I still want to say that Mini can be a product, if it's properly balanced, that can do both electric and combustion. This was also a bit of my story with the Deus collaboration, where at the end, I didn't want people to like one or the other because of its drivetrain and say like, oh, I like the electric better because I'm electric. I wanted to almost make it difficult to choose one, despite the drivetrain, despite it being electric or combustion. I think Mini is a brand that can also, while going electric, while having more electrification in its portfolio, retain its driving pleasure and fun in driving, because of the small footprint, really, and because of staying true to certain things like proportions you mentioned in the beginning, short overhangs, wheels on the corners. There are things that many other car companies have tried to copy, but Mini is still kind of alone in this area. A 3-door hatch. Obviously, you can always put 5 doors into it and you can create, but it changes the object. The Cooper itself is the anchor of the brand, and I'm very committed to keeping that. And with it, the very specific drive performance and how the car feels, that cannot be imitated with another volume. You can put more doors into it, you can create longer overhangs, more trunk volume. I always say this, that comparing numbers, it will not win the game when it comes to measuring trunk volume or something like this. But then if you want to do all of this right, this is the same with motorcycle, by the way. You know, I think R9T from BMW will not win on the track, but it will win a heart, and it will win on soul, on touching us for its authenticity. So we have to think about that Mini is a brand that, to me, it needs to deliver on an emotional scale rather than on the what I called a tool before. Mini always was also a brand that didn't get everything right, but that was also the beauty of it, you know.
Yeah, it's kind of some art vibe.
It has a certain behavior. Good things have a behavior. They behave sometimes very often how you wish them to behave, and sometimes they misbehave. But that makes them also very lovable.
And you know what? With the electrification, its system, its software is getting super complicated. Like in the internal combustion engine era, you can tune in the engine, you can tune in the transmission, you can tune in the suspension, and change the brake quite easily. But during the electrification era, you cannot change the brake because of the raging strategy. You cannot change this, you cannot change that. How can you still get the emotional bond with a Mini EV?
If I may, I would challenge you a little bit on this, and that is that with software you can tune everything. We can tune cornering, we can tune sliding.
By the company, not by
tuned by the company for now, let's say. But, you know, I think the first experiments have been done in terms of providing a number of experience modes to customers. And, you know, if you ask me, we've just seen the beginning of experience modes, so to say, and differentiating behavior of a car so that it kind of almost feels like I have tuned my car to a certain liking. And I believe, at least from what I've seen and experienced myself also in our testing of cars, we've just seen the beginning of that. It gives us great opportunities. And maybe it feels different than messing around with your engine or your brakes and so on. But I definitely think that it can give us very similar thrills in terms of how a car behaves and how it is tuned to certain days or the weekend.
With my J01, I like this feature a lot with different experience mode. Which experience mode do you like the most?
I drive mostly around in two different ones. I like the go-kart mode for sure, also with sound turned on. And then I like the economic mode for urban driving to save range and so on. So I switch between modes, and I definitely like that already now they make the car feel different and behave different. And if we continue on that path and maybe make some of these modes even more strongly appearing than or how they feel, that's a very interesting area of exploration to me in electrification.
So I assume that in the future, the emotional bond comes mainly from the digital rather than the geometry, right?
I also wouldn't agree. I think geometry remains very, very difficult. It's also what makes automotive design so interesting, because it's an object that has a combination of digital aspects, digital features, and also geometry in of itself. A car always, when it drives around and you see it in traffic, you don't judge its drivetrain. You judge it by geometry and how the volume feels to you. And that's a very emotional moment. We own cars ourselves, classics or new cars, and we tend to want to look at them. We study the geometry. It's something very satisfying. So that's also what interests me in design. Deos, for example, again, are two objects that are so little about technology and about digital. Yeah. They're all about geometry, material choice, and the object in of itself. And you see by the response to these two one-offs how important it is to do a good job on geometry and on material choice and on color choice, graphics. I think technology and digitality at some point of time, for the most part of the market, will be what we call a hygiene factor. We will all do, hopefully, a good job at it. Like I said before, it is then to tune the car maybe and to give it its own driving behavior and its own driving almost signature, I would call it. I repeat myself, but it's all about balancing these things, you know, form and digital feel and signature. A designer has to do a good job, and this is again with automotive design is the challenge, at the same time also really satisfactory if you get it right to balance all of these aspects, you know, and connect it back to the brand, which is the most important thing to me. If it feels just like something and I put a logo on the front and tell you this is now this brand, no, I'll rather do something else than be a car designer.
I remember Steve Jobs, he once said that if you are really good at software, you need to do the hardware. A good software experience, you need to rely on a good hardware. For me, Mini looks like the same. The emotional bond not just came from digital, it will come from the physical as well.
Yes.
You've worked across industrial design, automotive design, UI UX design as well. You have the most geometry objects and the most digital experience. After all these years, what do you feel design is really about?
To me, design is really about understanding the larger context, the world around us, the people around us, what people desire, what they need in their daily lives. Having a good understanding, contextual understanding, staying curious will give you the chance to design something for this context. To me, you've read about me. I'm not a car specialist or an automotive specialist. I have worked long enough in this industry to understand car design well, and I understand choice that differentiate good from bad design. Absolutely. I work with my team every day on design choices and on geometry. But I always use moments of zooming out and kind of putting what we do in context, which is very important today, even more so because we only have one planet Earth. Everything we put out there is potentially a burden to the planet. So I'd better get that right, and I better do a good job than putting something out there again that lands in the landfill or is being discarded after a short amount of time. We all know in design the best things are the things that we keep for a long time and that we cherish and we like for a time, that are hard to replace, that are hard to take out of our life again. This at the end is good design, and I hope Mini is one of the brands that delivers on that promise as well.
Before joining Mini, you were the president at DesignWorks. So you've been living in California and Munich, and maybe you had some business trips in Shanghai. For me, these three cities are totally different cultures. If you had to describe each city with one color, which three would you choose?
All these places like Germany and Munich, and also the places I visited in China, Shanghai and Beijing and so on, they're very vibrant and very diverse. So assigning one color is difficult. But if I do a quick pick for California, I would choose an afternoon pink, a pale pink. It's a moment during the day in California that kind of is the light change to the night light. Germany, I would pick something rather dark green, wet type of moist.
But that sounds like British to me.
Sounds British, yeah. Well, Germany has that as well, kind of a certain lushness and so on because of lots of rain and so on. It's not kind of a British racing green, it's kind of a tree green. And for Shanghai or the places I visited here, it's kind of also more of a pale color. It's a white bluish, maybe even a lighter blue type of color, yeah.
Interesting.
Don't ask me why, but I think these are the first associations I have.